interview, which in fact is on the next page as well, we just thought was very appropriate, and we're delighted that Teresa has tweeted about it already because she loves this metaphor. It's the gingerbread house. And what we're wanting to look at is how can we have the digital savviness, and how can we, not just ourselves and our colleagues, but how can our students have the digital savviness that we can enjoy the gingerbread without getting eaten by the big bad witch. So we're going to be looking at the range of tools and indeed resources that are very often free and that can transform our teaching and learning, but that need care in their handling. So that's what we're going to be looking about. The introduction and the about this session, you'll be able to come back and look at in your own time, because you're going to have access to the same learning resource that Ron's taking us through at the minute. So on the this slide just shows you who we are. We did think about doing something that was kind of seasonally themed and maybe putting us each in a pumpkin, but we decided not to, because this will be recorded and people will be looking at the recordings afterwards. You can find out more about the Future Teacher project, and there's the list of the webinars we've already done. Every webinar comes with a recording. Every webinar comes with the Xerte interactive learning object, full of links, full of activities, full of questions, full of the community contributions to the discussions, etc., that we have. And we're going to take you to that now. So in the link here, you can either go to the short URL, learningapps.co.uk/getsavvy, if that's one that you want to kind of make a note of for sharing with friends, or Ron's popped the long link into the resource. Now, into the chat. So if you open that up, you will be on the same page, and in fact you might be on the next page, I think, which is where we're going to be starting. And we always start the session with almost a caveat, which is, look, we know this is a really big area, and in the time we have available in a sort of 55-minute session, we're not going to cover everything. So it's useful for you to be able to come back at any point and look at the mind map, look at how in our heads we've organized this, and this will remain available, open to you. Anytime you come to this learning object, you'll be able to zoom in and out. Now, perhaps if I ask Ron just to kind of click on the zoom in and out buttons up on the top, just to show people how you can navigate through the mind map. And you can do this on your own one, so you can go, zoom in on areas. Some, well, you'll notice most of them will have a little, either a little bit of text next to them giving you more information, or we'll have a hyperlink that will take you somewhere. So this covers the area that we're going to be focusing on today, and it also covers some of the questions that people put in the registration forms. But I'm not going to go any more on the mind map now, because I want you to be able to go back to that at your own time with your own colleagues. What I want to do instead is hand over to Lillian, who's going to ask us about your top 3 tools.
Yeah, so this is an interactive screen. You will need to pop out to the learning object and go onto this particular page in order to type into it. Ron's going to demonstrate, aren't you, Ron? Type your answer here. So what are the top 3 tools for teaching and learning that you've used and possibly that you would recommend to other people? Type them in one at a time. So if you thought it was going to be like Google, Padlet, and Mentimeter, just type one word at a time. There you go. So yeah, if you'd like to make sure you've selected the learning object link and you're on your browser page, you can type it in. Have we got, do we need to refresh the learning object, Ron, to view some other answers? There you go. So there you go. The larger word symbolizes the answer that people use the most. Okay, most people have put in, more people have put in Padlet than anything else. More people have put in Mentimeter, Quizlet, and Twitter than anything else in Xerte. Google Slides, yep. Like Google Slides, explain everything, yep. Okay. Brilliant, that's a very nice range of tools. And Very good. There's some things I've not recognized in there. Edpuzzle, that might be quite nice to explore. Love Evernote, Tricida, LibWizard, that'll be a nice one to explore. Top Hat. Very good, people. Okay, that's really, really nice to know what your top 3 tools are for teaching and learning, and we'll come back and look at this. I mean, this is embedded into the Xerte object, so you'll always see this here now. And if you come back to the object, you can ask your colleagues to type in there as well. But we're going to go to the next page where we're going to ask you what the reasons were for your choices. You know, why were these tools your top 3 tools? So if you can pop into the text chat and just share with us why you chose those 3 particular tools, what made them so good that they're your top 3. I'll just wait for a few people. Interaction, that's it. Collaboration, Zeetings, feedback, ease of use and access. Yeah, playful, that's a very nice word, Sarah. Yes, it's very nice to kind of feel like learning doesn't have to be overly formal. Simplicity and intuitive, accessibility. So ease of use is coming up quite strong. Interactivity, definitely. And collaboration. Low barrier to entry. That's really good. I think we've got some consistency there of what we all agree makes a tool high value. I like the way that Jonathan's gone, free! Exclamation mark. Yeah, free is always good, but as we'll learn later on, it can result in some challenges as well. Okay. No, that's great. Thanks for all that input. I think it's really useful to see what everyone values in the tools that they use and how they prioritize it. And I just wonder sometimes if what we prioritize for useful in teaching and learning tools is the same as what organizations prioritize. And we'll consider that when we start to go in a little deeper. So now we've got a poll that we'd like to run with you.
Okay.
So this will be on, just for clarity, that the poll will be on the Zoom interface rather than on your Xerte object itself. And remember to scroll down because there's quite a few links here, but over to Ron.
Or just resize the window. So you should all be seeing the poll, and I'm seeing that a few people have responded. And we are asking you to limit your choice to your top 3. Top 3 reasons.
Now I've submitted, Ron, but I can't see the answers yet, so that might be the same. Oh, there we are. I can see.
I've dragged my screen sharing, which.
Yeah, no, it's. I can see the various answers coming and going.
We got 38 people in the room, so waiting for another 9 or 10. Well, actually, I'm probably one of those, and I can't contribute. So
yeah, and I signed in twice, so discount one.
Are we pleased to see that pedagogy is right up there in terms of importance, and accessibility a close second?
I'm very pleased with that.
No, it's good.
So I'm seeing that it's 81% responded so far.
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting that research and case studies validating suitability is really, really low, because I don't know about you guys who are maybe in learning technology positions. I probably spend quite a large proportion of my time writing up these case studies. And as you can see, they're very, very, they all get very low usage. It's something organizations want, and we all want to have evidence, but very few people actually go and look at that evidence. They go by word of mouth, they go by instinct, so the pedagogy part of it. Accessibility does feature high because part of the reason for wanting to use a tool is for more interaction, but also allowing more inclusivity in your teaching.
Okay, we're going to end the polling now. We've obviously got a few lurkers in the room because there's only 77% responses, but I'll end the polling, and that should mean that you see the results and almost want to cheer that pedagogy is top of the list there.
Yes, that's the right answer. But we possibly have a more sophisticated group here in that we have people that are interested in finding out about digital savviness. I'm always interested in any webinar or conference. I'm always interested in the people that aren't there and what they would do.
We want to extend that activity a little bit further and dig a little bit deeper and assess your knowledge and confidence when it comes to choosing tools and resources. And so we have a slightly different interaction. You need to do this in your own copy of the Xerte object rather than what you're seeing on my shared screen. And I'll put the link to the text chat because we've had some people sign in after the earlier links were posted. So there are 5 quick questions. Just look at the scale, choose which option most applies, hit the submit button, and then you should see the next question and the next question. At the end of that sequence of 5 questions, you'll see a graph that shows you your response, and then we'll move on and see what the collective responses look like. So just 30 seconds to quickly answer those questions. And the screen will be fairly static while you're answering those. Perhaps you can indicate in the text chat when you're done as well, and we'll move on to the second page of that resource. Okay, a few people are done. I'll show the collective results, but if people are still answering that, by all means continue, and I'll refresh the screen and we'll see the updated results. So you should have, as I mentioned, when you got to the end of the 5 questions, seen a spider diagram of your responses. But we have an embedded resource here that should show us the results from everybody's responses, and this is an average. I haven't, you'll probably see a better view of this than me actually at the moment because I haven't responded, but on your screen, if you navigate to the second page of that resource using the little buttons here, you can click on the key at the top to turn on and off those different responses. And the green is the average of all attempts.
Yeah, we've got quite a range of people, haven't we? So it seems to be quite balanced, shall we say, towards the middle. There's nothing skewing in particular. So
a fair bit of confidence in evaluating new technologies by the looks of it.
Yeah.
Accessibility seems a bit
Low,
yeah.
Just look at the accessibility question again quickly.
We can't easily see that without me actually responding to the.
Yeah, I think most people, maybe a lot of people have gone for I use tools and resources that have been recommended, assume they are accessible, or check for basic accessibility features. But it is quite time consuming to go and test something against, a diverse range of user requirements. And Alistair might have something to say about, how we can kind of make that a bit more efficient.
I think one of the key things is to involve students in a very transparent way right from the beginning. So if you're planning to use a new tool, just talk to your students about the fact that next week I want to try using this with you. I think obviously look at any accessibility information you can find on the tool, but very often it's really hard to find accessibility information, particularly on the less accessible tools. But also bear in mind that accessibility is very contextual, so you may have something that is not going to work with a blind student, but you don't actually have any blind students, and it may add fantastic value to learners who are feeling socially isolated, or learners who are dyslexic or lacking confidence or something. So, I don't think you refuse to use a tool because it doesn't tick all the boxes, but you just need to be aware of which boxes you are ticking and making sure that you're not disadvantaging any real people that you're going to be working with, as opposed to worrying about kind of theoretical people that you might not actually be disadvantaging.
Interesting that now I've refreshed this after there's been more responses. There's a higher percentage that are confident in copyright than some of those other totals. But as you said, Lynn, it's a fairly even spread, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, people are a little bit more aware with copyright and GDPR because of the GDPR, data protection, because of the recent GDPR exercise. But the next exercise that I know is on the horizon is the EU directive for accessible resources. So I would have thought that if we were to look at this in 6 months' time, the accessibility of tools and resources will feature quite high in terms of people's confidence, because they'll have been given or issued with more information, or they'll have done more training about that. So that'll be more recent.
Lee has shared a link to a resource there, but I won't open that because it will because obviously I'm doing this screen sharing at the moment. But
it is worth saying there's also JISC are doing a webinar it's a free webinar on an overview of the EU directive. It's on the 9th, I think it's Friday the 9th of November, and I'm involved in delivering that. So I'll see if I can find a link for you to sign up for that.
Therese has mentioned the B word as well. We won't talk about that because we have enough dialogue with our European counterparts on the future project. So we'll move on to many of you will have seen and contributed to an activity that we sent out in advance of the webinar to learn from the dead tools and services that we once loved and have now gone forever. So many of you will have contributed to this list, but you can see over on the left-hand side, again on your copy rather than my screen share. I'll put the link in the text chat. So you can still post to that list and it'll appear on the right-hand side. But Alistair, Lillian, were there any, when you looked at this, Posterous was clearly one that we were all fans of. There was a successor to that, or there is a successor to that called Posthaven, but that's a paid-for solution rather than free.
I never went down that route. I just grieved. I just went into a corner and wept and kept. Every time I wanted to kind of easily send up a piece of audio so that it would just automatically convert to MP3, I would weep for Posterous. I still remember its name to this day because it was so good. I tend to forget names, so.
We discussed in advance that we could spend an awful lot of time reminiscing about all of these tools with everybody, and it seemed quite a topic with going by the responses. You had a tip about Movie Maker, didn't you, Lillian? But the main point about this list is that you can come back and reminisce and see the list of dead tools in your own time.
But interestingly, what we also want you to do, and perhaps quickly in the text chat, how did you cope? What was your strategy when your favorite tool on which you had based a lot of your workflows or whatever, when that disappeared, how did you cope? So anything that you can pop in there quickly would be great.
I can't believe, Poppy says, I can't believe that people are still using hot potatoes. How are these...
They do, yeah. I've seen it. It's evolved a bit, but yeah.
Poppy, you need to move them on to Xerti. Simple as. They're just.
Potatoes is great.
It was good. It was good. But let's face it. You've got your millennials coming into the college. You want to show them something that's a little bit modern. So yeah, hot potatoes is good functionality. I've got no quarrels, but so yeah.
Interesting point there from Lee about moving off the tool before it's actually obsolete, because something better has come along, and that sometimes the obsolescence is triggered by something better being available. That's an interesting point, and I suggest there's probably several examples where that's absolutely the case.
So what was Poppy's question? I'm trying to move on. Okay, yeah. Yes, exactly. The discussion's on alt email, but I would say I think we all agree that sometimes they're a little bit tempered by mine's better than yours, or loyalty to the thing that they use day in, day out. I think sometimes we have to be a little bit more agnostic, or have a sense of how we can make recommendations, not just of our personal favorite tools, but of what will fit best for that particular teacher with that particular group of learners. So replacement for hot potatoes, Poppy was asking, is Xerti? I'll type it into, this is what we're using now, Poppy.
Well, while you're doing that, Lillian,
yeah.
I'll go on to the next bit, because that whole process of looking at dead tools and zombie tools brings up the whole point of how do we appraise a tool, and how do we judge if a tool's worth using? What are the hidden bits that might catch you out? How can you anticipate and work around issues, perhaps accessibility issues, or perhaps other issues relating to its use? And one of the things we're going to ask you to think about, not necessarily to do now, because you probably won't have it at your fingertips, but we're interested to know whether or not you have your own organizational processes, or your own organizational forms, so that if a new tool comes on the horizon and you just hear via Twitter or via a friend, oh, there's this fantastic new tool that I've been using with my students, do you have something in your organization that would allow you to formally do a quick run through, to be able to see for yourself and see if it ticks the boxes? So just a quick yes or no in the text chat would be great, just to get a sense of that. And then if you do have, we'd love you to put it in your own time, put it in the Padlet. So quite a lot of no's. There's a yes, wiki pages from Sarah. But it looks like there's a lot of no's. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to, perhaps if Sarah could pop a link in when it's convenient, not necessarily today, but onto that Padlet, I'm going to take you through something that I developed with a colleague of mine for exactly this purpose. So if we look at the next slide here, and again, if you follow this, we'd like you to follow this on your own Xerti object, because then you can fill it in. We've got an evaluating tools pro forma. And the purpose of this is not that this isn't, the be-all and end-all. In fact, we're so confident that this isn't the be-all and end-all that we'll be showing you how to get a copy of this that you can then tweak and amend for your own purposes if you wanted to. But what we have done is we've put together something that's giving you some pointers to look at, and for you to be able to tick on. And we're going to ask you just to select one of the tools. So everyone just takes us to the top and shows how to select from the drop down. It doesn't matter if the tool that you really want to look at isn't in the drop down, because you can just put other for the moment. But there's the drop down, you can choose. I've put a few that we know are quite current at the minute. If you're familiar with any of them, that's great. If you're not familiar with those, just do other and then answer the questions for the other. We're not interested in the data per se, although we'll ask you to put it in. We're really interested in the process. And when you try to answer some of the questions, how easy are they to answer? So that's your task. And we're going to give you 3 minutes, 4 minutes or so to have a go at doing that. And then we'll have a look at the kind of results that come back. But mostly we're interested in the process. How easy is it to find what you might need to find? Have you done this before for any other tools? How useful would this be within your context? Lee, I noticed, was, for example, discussing this already in his team. So filling it in on the Xerti object itself, I think everybody's still got access to that. If you joined late, Lillian's popped it into the text chat, just a couple up from where we are at the minute. So have a go at those. and I will open up and see what sort of results are coming in. When you get to the end, you don't have to fill in all the questions. If you know we're short for time, and it's a process-driven kind of activity, so you don't have to do the whole product. But when you filled in some of the areas that are particularly interesting to you, maybe because they're areas you wouldn't normally look at, then press the submit button, and then when you've done that, you can then, there's a link for you to have a look at the total results so far. You may need to refresh the screen just to make sure you have all the latest. Meanwhile, I'm going to have a look at what other people have done. So at the moment there's 6 responses, so that's great because other people are still working through it. But and if you click the view other responses, you'll be able to see.
I'm periodically refreshing.
Yeah, that's great, Ron. Thank you.
So
yeah.
I think one interesting point that didn't come up when we were doing this via text chat is like why people chose their top 3 tools. And, you know, collaboration came up, interaction, ease of use. And what this appraise tool does is it makes us consider whether the tool will help with reflection and tracking, which allows you to give feedback to the learner as well. And I think that's really quite nice. You know, I don't think reflection came up. Maybe it did and I didn't spot it, but it's a nice reminder. Using a tool like this is a nice reminder as we're thinking of a new tool that we might want to adopt.
So in terms of just timing and us keeping to schedule, I'm going to ask you to submit very shortly. Even if you won't need to do all of it. It's just to get an idea as to the sorts of things that you can do. So if you can press the submit button, scroll down and press that, that's great. We've gone up to 13 responses now. And just in the text chat, are there any reflections on that exercise? Just a minute or so. What are your reflections on doing that? Was it challenging? Was it encouraging? Was it helpful? Would you want to totally redesign it? Because you can, and we'll show you how to redesign it shortly.
I'm sharing that page on the resource.
Yep.
Alistair's.
Yeah, I think the framework's really, really good, and I'm looking forward to kind of sharing it with people here at the University of York to get them to prompt their thinking really about their use of tools.
So we've got some quite a lot of feedback here saying that it's useful, and if you're thinking, well, it's kind of useful, but if it's a sort of lukewarm, quite useful, but then that's not a problem, because if you think it could improve significantly, then on the page that Ron's showing at the moment and that you've got on your Xerte object, you've got a link there, a direct link, which will allow you to copy that to your own Google Drive, give you a complete form of your own version, and then tweak it to your heart's content.
Yeah, Carolyn, the point of this is to kind of introduce you to the fact that this exists, and you can go away and do it over and over again going forward, and share it with your colleagues as well. So don't worry, Ron's popped a link in that allows you to you can actually copy this form, adapt it. If there are any questions that you feel maybe too much or not enough, you can adapt it and then use it as your checklist going forward and share it with your colleagues, use it within your organization.
there's 3 words in the text chat that I think summarize what we want to achieve with this. Adam writes, makes you think.
Yeah.
And if you go away thinking, yeah, makes me think, that's great.
No,
So,
that's
shall we move on? This is still me, isn't it? Oh yes, savviness. Savviness is not just about the tools. Now we've done an exercise that makes you think about the tools, but there's also a need to bring a similar level of kind of critical thinking to the resources we use. Now, digital resources include ebooks, online courses, media collections, interactive resources, etc. And increasingly, there's more and more available through open educational resources, which is a fantastic movement. I know many here will be involved in that in some way. But it also applies to commercial things. Now, there are some extra factors that come in. And if we look at, so ebook, for example, when you get to that page, and again, come back in your own time, but if I just get Ron to click through a couple of those slides, you'll see that there are things to think about. And I've looked at accessibility in this aspect, but again, it's that 3-word phrase, makes you think. You need to think about some of these things. So that's in terms of just looking at one aspect, accessibility on one kind of medium, ebooks. But if we look at the other aspect, the outputs from different tools.
You may all need to refresh your Xerti resource, because actually while we were doing the previous activity, I realised that we hadn't yet updated the link.
That's not a problem. Okay, so yeah, if you refreshed your Xerti resource at this point, then the second element we wanted to look at was how sometimes you're in a position, and I know students are often in this position, do I download the PDF version of this, the EPUB 3, the HTML, etc. Having the same sort of resource in different formats can make a big difference to its usability, to its appearance, to its functionality, and certainly to its accessibility. And we got some really nice examples there where Ron has taken the same content, identical content, and then presented it using different tools in different formats. And that's well worth, again, coming back in your own time to look at. And then our third element in terms of looking at resources is a really nice open educational resources checklist or rubric, which comes from the British Columbia University. This is on the mind map as well, but it looks at things like authority, audience, access, and diversity. And for each of those, it's got proper explanations about what that might cover. So again, there's some great tools out there that do that 3-word phrase that Adam is forever in my debt for now. No, I'm forever in his debt. Makes you think. Really good information there. And then the last one on resources that we've put, and I'm sure there are other things you could do, but when you're looking at course materials and interactivities, there's still quite a lot out there. Some of it's quite old, National Learning Network, there's some good stuff there still, but there are some issues, and we'll look at the issues. There's the Welsh National Grid for Learning, and again, some great tools. There's the Blended Learning Consortium, which pools resources across FE. But with any kind of course materials, there are key questions. Can it be repurposed? Does the license allow it? Does the software allow it? Do you have a skill level that's required that makes it impossible to repurpose unless you've got a degree in some technology science? One of the reasons that we use Xerti in delivering all of these is that if you've got your own Xerti installation, you can take any of our Xerti resources and you can instantly change the language that's used there, swap one image for another, take out a page, add in a page, and you don't need technical skills for that. So that brings us on to looking at savviness in the bigger scale. Lillian, was it you going to take this bit on?
Yeah, I think we just kind of had a chance to consider how we assess tools, how we assess resources, and it was just a chance to kind of start thinking about organizational level of savviness, really. Starting to think about if we improve our savviness, what else do we need to do to ensure that the tools that we use, the information about that suitability of the tool is propagated? Okay, so there are things you can do at the team level, things you can do at an organizational level, and even things you might want to do in when you kind of communicate with your suppliers about the tool and its functionality. So yeah, this bit we're going to move on to this kind of a bell curve. Okay, so this is actually Alistair's bell curve, this design. And so, Alistair, do you want to come back into to discuss this at this point, or do you want me to?
Yes, one of the things that I've noticed in my work with JISC, going around lots of different universities and colleges, is that the benefits to teaching and learning can appear to follow some sort of almost bell curve shape, depending on the degrees of freedom. And at the one extreme, I remember visiting a college where it was completely laissez-faire, and staff were encouraged to go out, try their own tools, look around, and so on. It was no central direction, no central control. It was, if you want it, have it. Now, that didn't actually result in, from what I could see, it didn't result in very happy experiences. There was no learning. There was no kind of consolidated staff development. The students had no idea what to expect. So it was a kind of a joyful, chaotic freedom that I don't think actually had real benefits for teaching and learning. But I've been to far more places that are the exact opposite, where it's so controlled and locked down that if I wanted to, work with the student and say, hey, why don't you just put this plugin into Chrome, because then you can do this, no chance, it just won't happen. And so it feels to me that between that long tail of safety, which is the highly controlled lockdown to make sure everybody's safe and everything's secure, and that kind of long tail of innovation, that somewhere in the middle is where we want to be. But so we're interested in kind of where your organization is within that bell curve. Are you kind of happily in the middle? Are you more controlled than you want to be? Are you kind of more free than you think you ought to be? And does that perception vary on your role? So if you could tell us where you think you are on that curve and what your role is, that would be interesting, because we think that might be influential on people's perception. And then whether or not there are processes, policies, or training plans that might help you not to stray too far to one end or the other.
Yeah, I think at my uni, I'd be very keen to use the appraise tool as part of that process, so that where we have this thing where we give advice on supported and unsupported tools at the uni, and we're not saying don't ever use an unsupported tool. It's a fact, recognizing that we're a small team, we can't support every tool that every teacher wants to use with their learners. But if they are going to go off and use a tool, it'd be very nice to give them some guidance on what to look out for. Now, we currently do this on the website, but making them work through the appraise tool would be even better, I think. So some organizations have very control computers, very locked down, but there will be a way, if you've got a pedagogic need, to go back to the central team and ask for that software to be available to all of the organizations so they can push it out. It might be a queue for them to consider it, but that can actually increase adoption of a good tool, and it really makes you think through how usable it is, how transferable it is to everyone in the organization.
I was just thinking with that earlier activity with the dead tools, at this end, this freedom end, we might put little illustrations of little tombstones to represent all the dead tools that people use that are part of that freedom, but it's also part of that consideration, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so this is another bell curve. So it's kind of, but not directly related to the previous slide, to the previous page. But when we were having a discussion earlier, we were kind of saying, well, this all relates to this trend in terms of how early or late adopters use technology. So Roger's diffusion of innovation, he talks about how this trend happens when there's something new. You get the innovators, you get the early adopters, and then you get people who are slow to adopt or who never adopt. And we recognize people like that in our organizations. And this bell curve is kind of showing, I think, a fact that the majority of the people in your organization are either early majority or late majority. So your strategies for training guides, your policies, etc., they have to account for all these different groups of people. So you might put on a kind of user forum for your early adopters, and that works very well for them. And you might put on training sessions for early or late majority people, and that will work very well for them. And then you've got the laggards, where nothing will work unless you go right up to their desks and wave it under their noses, and even then, you know, you struggle. So you do need different strategies. If you're going to kind of think about organizational savviness, you do need to kind of cut to the cloth, as it were, and not just have one strategy, but multi-pronged strategies. I'd be quite interested to see if anyone has any ideas for, or any successful stories about how that's worked in their organization. But yeah, I think we'll leave that for now and move on to the next thing about, this was a topic that came up in when we asked you guys about what things you wanted to find out about. And this came up quite a bit, keeping up with technology. How do you keep up with technologies? You know, for those of us who are early adopters or even early majority, we're kind of like, oh, there's so much on the alt list, there's so much on Twitter, there's new stuff all the time. How do we keep up? And this is an illustration, I guess, that it's like the microwave, isn't it? You go to someone else's house and can you work their microwave? You know conceptually what a microwave will do. You might even know how many minutes you want to heat something up for, depending on the power. But different tools have different buttons in different places. And sometimes even your savvy technologists will struggle if the software has been badly designed, if the interface has been badly designed. So there's something to be said for transferability, knowing the skill rather than where the buttons are. That's the key thing. And people who are savvy recognize that they've gone past the buttons, they kind of understand the concepts. And then there's experience. So the thing about experience, it's true, isn't it, that with savviness, you can put people in front of the appraise tool. You can say to them before you use a tool, or as you learn a tool, I want you to consider the pedagogy. But learning a new tool is like driving, and I think ECDL was very well named, the computer driving license was very well named, because learning about a tool and using it for teaching and learning, you can know the functionality, but understanding conceptually where it works best is something that you develop through experience. And it's not always possible for one teacher to pass that experience on to the next teacher. You can explain it, but the other person actually has to walk the path and live it and reflect on it. So the whole Kolb experiential circle, that is the thing that really needs to happen for people to really develop savviness. So training sessions, not good enough. People need to run projects, really. Okay. Yes, I think Teresa's noted the amazing microwave that is kind of a toaster as well. I was quite envious of that when I saw it. So just a bit of chat with you guys. How do you keep up with new learning technologies? You know, we're kind of going to turn the question on its head. There are people who asked, how do we keep up with it's too much? So let's ask the audience, how do you all keep up with new learning technologies? Do you have a strategy? Do you have some hints and tips for everyone else? So in the text chat, if you can find it, that would be really good. So yeah, forums, blogs, Twitter, attending things like this, that's great, Catherine. Alt mailing list. Now, word of mouth, I have a strategy. When I look on Twitter, my blood pressure goes up because there's just too much new stuff that I can't keep up with. So I use the power of 3. I'll pop onto Twitter and I'll only read, except for the adverts, the top 3 tweets, and then I'll come out of it. And I do the same on Facebook, and I do the same on like alt list. You know, I kind of scan, and then I pop out again before I get too involved. And I'm not sure if that works for you, or if you feel you have to immerse yourself totally in Twitterverse or alt lists to get the most out of it. Talking to very savvy people here, Angela. I quite agree. We're learning quite a lot just watching what you guys have to contribute. Scanning, yeah, Teresa, that's the word for it. Yeah, scanning. I'm not sure about you guys, but yeah, definitely. My blood pressure goes up.
When you get back to look at the mind map, there's a list of kind of recommended EdTech blogs. And again, many of you will be familiar with those. But if you're not, if you haven't got particular people that you might be following on blogs, there's a list there, and it's well worth kind of just dipping in now and again. That's what I tend to do if I get a spare moment.
I think, Alistair, Lillian, the thing that we'd all echo, because we have all been around for, each of us been around for a long time and been part of many national projects and so on. And we've all done those kind of residentials or gatherings at conferences and so forth. And even on this Future Teacher thing, the thing that we often get the most value out of is that informal discussion when we're all together, isn't it? And the way we all have worked in organisations is having those one-to-one and small group discussions about different technologies and different solutions for solving a teaching and learning problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all want to see Poppy's spreadsheet. Absolutely. I think we all have strategies, don't we, personally, to keep on top of the information flow. And I think that's quite important. And your newcomer is going to be inundated. If they're just starting on their learning tech journey now, they're going to have so many people who have so many favorite tools who want to share it with them. They're going to have to... Basically, you kind of need to teach people some of your control mechanisms or your sanity mechanisms along the way. So it's not just about teaching them the tool, it's how to cope with the information flow as well. Oh, Emma's just mentioned Digo. Oh, Digo, yes. Delicious and Digo. Okay, so moving on. It's lovely to see all that chatting. We in the past, if we're kind of referencing back to our very first webinar, and this is kind of like a shout out to some of the resources that we developed for those of you who have attended this who are attending this for the first time. This is our 13th webinar. So if you went all the way back to our first one and looked at the Xerti resource, we recommend people actually use rubrics, models, and frameworks to kind of develop this kind of savviness or understanding about learning technology. And that's one thing. If you're introducing your colleague to a new tool, I think it does help to kind of provide them with a map, an overview, to help them to know that they're at the start of a journey and to consider all the different things that they need to do, because it becomes a habit and you need to develop that habit from the outset. So having some frameworks to guide us is really important. If we can just pop on the frameworks tab, TPAC was something we introduced in the very first webinar, and we do return to it again and again as part of the Future Teacher series, because it provides a very nice way for colleagues to think about technology and pedagogy. So that there's a sample TPAC questionnaire that you can click on to kind of see the kind of questions that again help with your reflection on the purpose of the tool and the effectiveness of the tool. Okay, Teresa's saying that, yeah, they use TPAC and Evolve, so that's great. Right, so it brings us on to our DigComp Edu framework. I know just because it's digital capability, and there are loads of other frameworks out there as well. But this is the European framework for educators' pedagogic competencies with regards to using technology. So it's quite an important progression point, I guess, and it's been widely consulted. So the kind of statements of competencies I think you'll find are very, very useful. So if you're in an organization where you would like your colleagues to kind of gauge what level they're at, and to kind of work out which areas they might need to develop, I invite you to come and look at this competency framework. It's linked in the Xerte object. You may find it's very, very useful. We're working to this as part of the Future Teacher project, and we're finding it more and more useful each webinar that we actually deliver. Okay. And then it comes to, we come to the big face-to-face event that we've got on the 9th of January. It's going to be here at the University of York, and as you know, York is a beautiful Roman town, and it's got a lot going for it. So apart from the conference, you've got a lovely location. We'd love to meet you and actually connect with you at a face-to-face event. Apart from, Ron, Alistair, and myself will be there. Obviously, we'll have some of our European partners here. Some of the people who have guested on the webinars prior will actually be at the sessions, so you can ask them more questions as well. I think Teresa, we'll see if she can book the date so that she can turn up. That would be really, really good. But at that session, you'll get to find out about the digital thermometer, compass, and journeys that we're building with our European colleagues. And again, there's lots of takeaways from there, so that you can actually install it in your own organizations, use the resources, repurpose the resources. Everything's kind of a big giveaway.
It's worth reminding quickly, Lillian, that this is a European project, and we have equivalent events in the Netherlands and Norway. So if for any reason somebody can't make exactly that date, there is the opportunity to join us in one of those other countries as well. But
and the final one, sorry, Ron, the final one's in May in Belgium, actually.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Is it worth clarifying whether people need to be able to speak Norwegian or Flemish?
Well, Ron and I are going across to the Netherlands one, for instance, so we're speaking in English, or in Yorkshire for some of us. Ron will mostly be speaking Southern.
Cockney's, yeah.
Cockney's. And do you know what, our European partners, we work in English, and everyone is committed to developing their materials in English to start with. So, I guess the answer is no, but you do have to go with an open mind. Okay, yeah, Graham, good. See if you can attend. It'll be really, really good to see you guys on the 9th. And some of you, I think, joined, Jonathan Brown lives 10 minutes away. No excuse then. Hope to see you there.
He's asking, will there be recorded sessions at the...
Yes, we will have recordings. So we will have recordings, and we'll aim to put them out via our Future Teacher YouTube channel, and make those available as well. Like I say, a lot of them are following the themes from our webinars, so you can always go in and look at our webinar sessions, and we may have different questions and different things, different points will come out depending on the audience that's there. So yeah,
we should also add though that one of the things we struggle with during these webinars is just the limited time that we have, and those sessions at the event will obviously be much richer and much more in depth and so on. So no substitute for being there, I don't think.
And there's lunch times and coffee breaks to continue the conversations.
Yeah. Are we going to do the just one thing as well, Ron?
Yeah.
Before
Yeah.
or after?
So yeah.
Okay.
So a very quick reminder for those that are new here: if you haven't already joined our mailing list, on your resource you'll find those details. I'll skip past the exercise. There's a page that refers to our next webinar, which is in November on the 30th, and is about designing appropriate assessments. And then, as usual, we have a final page that's about the Xerte resource. But as a finishing activity, we'd like you to put in the text chat what one thing you would do as a result of what we've discussed during this particular webinar, and be as specific as you can. we take that and have that inform our kind of developments and discussions and developments of the journeys and so on.
Oops.
I've popped my takeaway in there. Thank you, Julian.
Sorry, I think I probably confused Teresa by sending her an accidental private message which was meant for Jonathan. Well, it was not even private. It's just about where to find other webinars. If you enjoyed this one, it's your first one, or you haven't been to many, you want to have a look at the ones that have already taken place, that's the link I've just put in there for everyone.
Yeah, so I need to train Alistair to use the bit.ly, which is bit.ly/FT30 UK page, which I've typed in there already. But Digital Competency Framework, that's great. Lots of people are very kind of interested in that. That's good to know. Yes, Poppy, you need to look into Xerti. Get in touch. I think you've got our get in touch via the future teacher list, Poppy, and we'll help you out with that. Graham as well, if you're interested in Xerti.
And I did notice some chat earlier where one of the things we are aware of, and we do apologise for, is that sometimes keeping up with these sessions can be quite tricky because we're taking you through activities. Sometimes we're asking you to do things on the text chat, and sometimes we're asking you, which requires being in the Zoom interface. Sometimes we're asking you to do things on the Xerti resource, which is in a different window. And if you're on a single device or an iPad or something, that can be tricky. But at the moment, it's kind of the least worst options that we've been able to develop, because by putting everything in the Xerti object, it means that we can give you lots of different opportunities to collaborate. It means that we can allow you to access resources almost independently, differentiation taking place as we go along, if you need to spend more time looking at something. And it does mean that by using the Xerti object like that, we've saved you having to have another 10 windows open, having Answer Garden open, Google Forms open, plus a load of other things, because it's all taking place in one place. But we do understand with one screen it can be tricky, but we're balancing that against the fact we don't want to talk at you. We want to be drawing out the wisdom of crowds, and so we try to make it really active sessions. So if sometimes that feels the wrong side of the balancing point, we do apologise, but we do want to keep it as lively as we can and as as rich, so that you can see tools and think, oh, I could use that as well.
Yeah, I think that's quite valid. I think at one point we did consider just having group chat and, if you like, quite slides, so a bit more toned down. But I guess feedback from previous participants has indicated their experience of Answer Garden or Tricida or the Padlets, or the way we use a particular tool, has given them an idea. So we try and keep that rich. But yeah, that does become a challenge, I think.
And if you struggle to keep up, we completely understand that. But do bear in mind that the Xerti resource is there forever. You'll be able to, well, I say forever, for the foreseeable future, years, we hope. I think 4 years or something, we're committed to keeping it all going. So you can come back to that at any point, and the recording will probably be live by the end of next week. The recording's always about a week or so before it gets up, so you'll be able to follow again. So we balance all these different things. We know it's hard sometimes to keep up, but we'd ask you to kind of bear with us if it helps us to give you a richer overall experience.
Okay,
so I'll stop the recording now. We usually have a bit of an informal chat as people are leaving, so by all means stay and listen to that, or even contribute and open your mic.
Put your microphones on, yeah.
I'll stop the recording now.